All right, our liners are now dried to and glued, epoxied to our giraffe bone scales. And now, to get that excessive glue off that overflowed, I'm taking some 220. I put a little WD-40 on it, and again, back to hand sanding in the figure 8 or circular pattern. Flip them around from time to time. And I'll go from 220 to 320 and get those sanded and get back with you. Okay, we've been sanding on our 320, and as you can see, we've been sanding on the inside of the liners. We're not sanding on the outside yet. After we get this all good and shined up on the inside of our liners, you can see where our milled out proportion is. We'll be going over to the bandsaw, and I'm simply going to cut these, cut the excess bone off of the liners with a bandsaw. I won't bore you with that, but you got to be very careful getting up to the edges. When I get pretty close, then I'll take it over to the grinder, and I'll get even closer and go down in from belt grit. Probably start with 60 and go down to 120, and then ultimately 220 and 400, and being very careful not to take any material off of the liner itself. We want to get as close as we can without taking any material, because everything's fitted up so far. So, all right, I'll get back with you shortly. Okay, so this is a drilling jig that allows me to get perfectly vertical holes through the scales, through the liners and scales. We haven't drilled those out yet, and this simply sits over on the milling machine. And this jig, I did not design this. I made this jig, but I did not design it. I saw one in a magazine at Jant's Knife Supply, where actually Jant's Knife Supply is where these this scale come from, and the liner material both. This aluminum I bought from my good buddy, my buddies Charlie and Travis Threed over at Crossville Metal Fabricators. This is some 01 tool steel, and I simply put some set screws where you can tighten these down, and of course this slides back and forth in case you have a longer scale. But this simply sits into the drill press and allows us to drill perfectly vertical because the handles are uneven, and so we'll do them one at a time, and that way our pins will line up vertical and parallel to each other. So get back with you at the drill press. Okay, so you can see we've got our jig lined up, and I'm just holding it in here on top of my vise to where I can move it around, and from this point I'll hold it tight, and we will drill our holes through our scales vertically with this jig holding it in place. It'll be perfectly vertical. We're turning about 400 RPMs, and here we go. Don't want to get bone real hot to heat up the liners, because if you do, your epoxy or CA glue, whatever you use, tends to let loose. But this stuff drills out pretty good. Sorry, my hand's in the way there. And we simply get a good vertical hole that way. All right, and then we'll do the other two, and then lock in the other scale, and I'll get back with you after we're done with that. So you can see how nice and clean our holes came out using that jig, and they line up perfectly. I've already put some pins in. The next step will be cutting out the material, the excess material, cutting it off and grinding it down as close as we can to the edges of the liner.